burning and falling over the roadway, and the fire coming across and lighting the cars in front. And so everybody's fleeing back towards you. I mean, it looks like some of these movies where a car is sitting in the back in traffic and all of a sudden this big wave of something comes forward and everybody's running right at you. So yes, that was.
Good afternoon, folks. Jake Swig, United States Navy SEAL, 15-year college football coach, mentor some of the world's finest. Today, folks, we got the one, the only Jason Wines on here, Navy SEAL, how the November 8th, 2018 campfire took his house, and then the aftermath wasn't easy. I talked to you right after it happened in 18. It was scary. It was terrifying, but
Okay, yeah. As far as leading up to the fire, there wasn't a lot to say. It just sparked. Obviously, the results came from a bad power pole, and unfortunately, the high winds um, just made such a rapid moving fire that nobody could believe it was moving that fast. I was fortunate that morning, just happened to be staying home. The office needed a trailer, so I could see the smoke. My dad grew up fighting fires in the hills and taught me how to read smoke, and it just didn't look right. So I just had the family start packing up, and so we were fortunate. Being trapped, and I think this is where a lot of things are going to come into play, maybe for some people. As you know, Jake, when you're faced with insurmountable odds, violence, danger, the number one thing you can't do is stop and panic. Always try to find something to do, something productive to move. If you're trapped in a corner, find a place to go. Keep that stress from jumping in there, because that will lead, and our family has experienced that, to where you get into that PTSD issue where that takes a long time, as we know. So we got to stop that ahead of time. After the fire, I pretty much knew the town was gone. So my mind immediately shifted. I got to find shelter and food. A lot of people have a tendency to.
walk me through like let's say the 2 hours before you left, and I'd really like to hear about, like when you told me you left, like the roads were all packed with cars. You were driving on the right side, like going through people's yards. I think that's important for people to understand. Like if you get down to the bitter end and you leave, there's a big difference than if you had left like 6 hours before, right? Like I felt like when you told me the story, you were in the complete like, holy shit, the fire is behind my car, ashes are everywhere, like kind of the Armageddon trying to get out. But I think that was I like that part of the story because it was so powerful to me that like 10 minutes later, you might not have made it out at all.
Oh, absolutely. And as it was, I was trapped for 8 hours because of the amount of cars that were burned in front. But yes, unfortunately, all roads leading out of town all became blocked, and nobody really had a good plan about where the routing of traffic was. So they were blocking traffic, thinking they were doing the right thing, but that created a gridlock. And you literally had trees burning and falling over the roadway, and the fire coming across and lighting the cars in front. And so everybody's fleeing back towards you. I mean, it looks like some of these movies where a car is sitting in the back in traffic and all of a sudden this big wave of something comes forward and everybody's running right at you. So yes, that was. And I know the town. So, and I was carrying a 37-foot trailer. So I found a way to flip around and get by. And yes, getting on the side of the road, getting anywhere. And I tried to find the largest wide spot in the road where they had some rocks as landscaping instead of vegetation. And I parked the truck there and I said, this is where I'm going to fight it out. And so we broke into, another guy stopped with me. So we broke into garages, grabbed some shovels, and we just started doing little dirt sorties, trying to throw spot fires out so it wouldn't catch some trees on fire, which then would keep the house safe, which would then keep us safe. And so we did that for about 4 or 5 hours until the fire immediately passed. Propane tanks blowing up all around. It definitely got pretty intense.
So I didn't realize that. I thought when you left your house, you had managed to get out, but you didn't. You got
No, we
trapped
got
there.
trapped.
You had to use your resources and break into some people's houses and get shovels and try to make some fire lines and keep the fire suppressed in your area, man.
And then there was an old timer that couldn't get out, and somebody came running over and said, "Hey, this guy's having a heart attack." So we stopped what we were doing, and gave him some chest compressions and got him breathing again, sat him down, and got back to it.
Let me ask you this. If you had to obviously be in that situation again, what are maybe your top three things that maybe you would have done differently or you wish you would have had?
Thing I would have done differently is not try to stand back and try to save my house. I thought this was just another fire that was going to pass. I had cleared my property. I felt I was in a good spot, and I thought, no, I'm going to get the family out of here, but I'm just going to hang back. With a 37-foot trailer, you're not going to go anywhere once it starts getting gridlock. So that'd be the number one thing. It's only stuff. Always have your getaway kit of all your family photos, the hard drive stuff, the important documents, have that in a bag ready to go, and which we did, throw that in the car and just go. The rest of it is just stuff. Then the number two thing is you got to have your water. If you don't have water and you get trapped, I mean, that's where we were having trouble because the whole town got the water got shut off. So there was no water to do anything with. And I think LA is absolutely seeing that same issue. And so always have a bug out kit with a couple gallons in the car.
And I just shot a video about being prepared, right? And everybody's like, "Oh, you're fear mongering." I'm like, "No, I'm just trying to be prepared."
Yeah, that's a frustrating comment from people. It says fear mongering. It's like, no, this is from experience. It doesn't take anything to put 2 gallons of water in the back of your trunk or in your car and just let it set. You never know. Could be a radiator issue. Later in the campfire, the most traumatic thing, surprisingly, because of the military, we were adapted a little bit better for traumatic situations. It didn't bother me too much. But when I went later as part of the job, going back to search for bodies, search for homes that survived, trying to take care of the community, I had a little raccoon that was all burnt, and he came up and was rubbing his little hands, and I didn't have any water in the car. I couldn't even give him any water. And to this day, I still think of that little raccoon because I wasn't prepared. And that's the stuff that gets us is when we have the opportunity and we don't take time to do it right.
How long was it before you got back to your house and was able to kind of assess the damage? I had thought you got out of town, but clearly you didn't.
Sorry, bud, that delay of audios. So we were fighting fire in that area, and then once the fire came through, it was probably another 3 hours, and then we couldn't save any more houses. It was too hot. We weren't going to do anything. We were safe, but it was now burning in front of us. So the guy I was with, we turned our rigs around, and we were able to drive on the shoulder road and weave through the traffic. And I'd only made it half a mile. So I went back to the
Okay.
house, and I figured I better drop the trailer off. My house is going to be fine. Big empty lot. Got back to the house. Obviously, house isn't there. So I dropped the trailer off, helped the guy I was with drop his trailer off. And then we started trying to get out of town because at this point, I'd already sent my family off. And the last communication I had with my wife was she was telling me that they're trapped and that they were going to have to get out and run. And then the cell towers went. So I had no idea where they were. We did have a plan. I know that if she got out where she'd be, but now I got to go find them. So had the truck, driving over fiery logs, animals on fire coming out of the tree lines, make it down, took me about an hour to weave through the obstacles that were in the way. And then a funny story, I finally make it out of town and I start heading down and I see this flickering yellow in my rear view. And I'm thinking, what idiot cop or somebody trying to pull me over right now? So I look closer. It's like, oh no, the bed of my truck is on fire.
Oh man.
so, so thank goodness some cops were coming around the corner and I knew them. So I stopped and they gave me a fire extinguisher and we put out my truck and then went down. So all in all, I was fire started around the main evacuation for us started about 7:45, 8 o'clock. And then I made it down to Chico, our neighboring town, about 6 o'clock. So just shy of about around 10 hours before I could get out of the town.
Man. And then you were able to reunite with your wife. And I think it's important that you guys had a plan, right? Like my wife, like we got 3 levels of plans, including if I'm not in the country, she knows where to find me, right? Like I think that's a very important thing. Like stick to the plan. If we're supposed to meet in Chico, like where was your meet point at?
So the first thing I'm very blessed with, I have a former SEAL that's also part of the Chico Police Department, and so my wife worked for him. We're partners in a indoor shooting range. And so she knows to immediately call him. And of course, he's dropping everything to help out my family.
Yeah.
So I knew exactly where they were going. I called her, let her know that we were okay, let her know initially that the house was gone. And then I met up with them and we told the kids, and we didn't hide anything. It's like, this is what we're dealt. It's time to shift gears and start a new plan.
24 hours afterwards, right? Like, where did you stay? What was the main thing you needed? Kind of obviously, I know the insurance probably got into play next couple of days. You know, you called the insurance company, they probably asked for a ton of pictures. You got all that garbage. There was a big fight whether the power company or the insurance company. But in that first 24 hours, what were some things that you really wish you had, or you had and you're like, oh my God, I'm so happy I have this?
Yeah, that's so the number one thing is we have friends. We have people that we can rely on. Use them. They are waiting to help. So I immediately went to we that first night. We're out rendezvoused with our friend, the former SEAL, and from there we went to a good buddy of mine. He was a lieutenant with me, and he's got a little bit more space, no kids, so it was a little bit more convenient for everybody. I knew I had the trailer up on the hill. I just needed to get back there, and I immediately made reservations at a campground. And so we stayed for 2 days at my friend's house. That allowed me to get up to the hill, get my trailer, and then get it down and start setting up some stability for the kids.
And how old were the kids, Jason?
So that time, let's see, my daughter would have been 10. I'm sorry, no, she would have been 12, 13, and then my son was 10, had just turned 10.
So at an
And
age where stability and a house and all of that stuff is probably, you lose everything, it's really traumatic for them at that age.
yeah, I mean, my kids are so outstanding. It's they knew, hey, it's out of our control. Suck it up and let's move on. And so they did a fantastic job, but that was something I needed. Again, that's find something you can do. Don't just sit in a house waiting for somebody to call. Make something happen for your house. Make something happen for yourself.
Yep.
That's the number one thing. Look forward, put one foot in front and move. People who waited, that's the people who really had trouble down the road later on, especially finding housing. And LA is going to 300,000. Where are you going to put them? And so that's where families have to be thinking, is where we're going to go. And I can get way into details on how to.
You were prepared, right? Like I'll say this, you were lucky. You had a 37-foot trailer, right? Like,
Absolutely lucky.
you were lucky. But you also had some friends. And I'm sure, like, if your friends are like my friends, if I called a couple of my friends in town and said, hey man, listen, our house just burned to the ground. Can we stay with you for, 2 weeks while we figure this out? Right. But the problem is I'm in a one-off situation. My house burned down. My whole city didn't burn down, right? Like Palisades, like they're not going back to school this year.
No.
Like there's no, like nothing is going to be fixed for probably 2 years. And that's the part of it that, like you're saying, from a personal perspective, like as the head of the household, you got to be positive. You got to put one foot in front of the other. You got to understand life moves on, and you cannot slow down because life ain't gonna wait for you. Okay, so let's look at it from a week standpoint. You got the trailer set up in the RV lot. You got your kids stable. They sleeping in the same bed, albeit an RV, but you pitched them on camping, and we get to camp for the next 2 or 3 months. Um,
They loved it. They thought it was great.
were their schools open? Did their schools open back up, or did their schools get hit?
No, the schools were all down. And so there was no school for, I believe, about a month,
Okay.
is that everything was just shut down. We were part of a charter school, which did a fantastic job of trying to shift the school from Paradise down to Chico. So they got into a church and they did exactly what they should be doing is moving forward. And
Okay.
they were very positive, and the kids were excited to go back and see their friends. And obviously some people have left and never came back, but it gave them something to look forward to.
And I take it prepared you well for COVID because the same thing happened basically.
Yes.
Let's walk through two things: your thought process, and then what could you have used. Or let me put it this way: you had a trailer, a place, like you kind of had like a mobile home, right? What would you say the general populace of the disaster could have used the most?
Obviously, housing. There was about 30,000 in the town that we came from, and the city of Chico is only about 80 to 100,000. So you're adding a third of the population back to it. There was no housing whatsoever. So people were having to go to Sacramento, which is about an hour and a half away, and different towns. There was a lot of people that had to go at least 45 minutes away. So the RV allowed us to be fairly stable while we looked and immediately, and I guess I'm going to move to this point real quick. People are going to have to make a decision pretty quickly as to what their plans are, whether they're going to leave entirely or they're going to try to set up and rebuild or do something. You've got to make that. I knew I was not going back to paradise. I could see it in my wife's face. I could hear it in her voice. I was never going to see that hill again living there. We're going to be buying in Chico. So, with that in mind, I immediately started putting pieces together to try to find a house before this massive onslaught of purchasing went. And it was ugly even then. So, understand what you're going to have to do. And yes, it's a tough thing to do, but do it so you can move forward. You can adjust a little bit later down the road. You're not locked into anything, and that's where we get into the insurance about how things work. But find a plan. And I knew it wasn't, so we just moved forward. Again, very fortunate. Within a month, we were in a rental house, and within 2 weeks of that, we had locked down on that we were in escrow on a house.
So I think this is important for people to understand. You moved quickly and you moved decisively trying to execute the plan. You did not stand still. You did not wait. You did not hope. You started moving because everybody that waited, I imagine that housing market went through the roof in a matter of about 3 weeks. And if you were on the front end, you paid 600,000 for a house. If you were on the back end, you paid $1 million for that same house.
Spot on. So the house we bought had been on the market about a year earlier, and it had not sold. So they took it off the market. Now they put it back on the market. There's a bidding war, and we're bidding 80,000 over asking that was already over from the previous sale price.
Yep.
And we got lucky with only 80 over asking.
Yep.
Some people are doing 100, 150,000 over.
Yep. Yep.
So, but it's
Supply and
not,
demand.
but the people that need to understand it is not a permanent decision. You are not locked into that decision entirely. And I think it's going to be a factor there because of the amount of housing. There's some options there.
Yeah, like you could have bought that house and turned around and decided, okay, a year from now we're going to relocate to Denver. You could have sold that house and moved to Denver, right? Like you're saying, all you're saying is you moved decisively to secure a house, but that's not locking you in 100% to Chico. Or is that right?
Yeah. So insurance companies are required to put you as part of your terms, put you in a like house. Normally that means rental. Well, there are no rentals. So one of the things I looked in my policy and it allowed me, it didn't say any specifies of who's doing the rental. So I bought the house because there's no place to live. Because I didn't know if it was going to be permanent yet in this house, the insurance company actually paid my mortgage as my rent. So now
Okay.
they're paying that. And then later on, it came to the point of, all right, are we going to make this permanent? And then we would have been done and closed out that side. But it paid us rent so that for about a year and a half, we would have been able to do that to get your bearings underneath you. So that's where I say it's not permanent. You have options.
Okay, so let's transition into the insurance company and some of the big things that you learned dealing with them. How'd you handle it? Would there be some things you did differently? Like you're a smart dude, so but I also know that first time dealing with something like this can be, you make one decision and all of a sudden you got a problem, or you don't make a decision on insurance, right?
Mm-hmm. So yes, I'll tell you, Nationwide is not on your side But really, it's down to the claims adjuster. And so know your policies. You're going to have an A, B, C, and D that are the primary coverages that you're going to be worried about. And your A is your dwelling. Your the B I think is the other structures. C is your content, and I think D might be debris removal. I can't remember the specifics, but know what those
Yep.
are because each one's a little pocket. It's not one giant insurance. You have to establish justification for every one of them. No, D is loss of use. I think that's where the D is the important one for people right now. Is that
Loss of use.
D? Yeah, it's the loss of use category.
So were there some things immediately, like when you first called your claims adjuster, that you could have done better or differently?
No, I was pretty aggressive. Again, back to go to a plan. The biggest thing we had to overcome is helping the insurance company understand the magnitude, because when it initially went out, the insurance company is just looking at it as it's just another fire claim. So they'd say, hey, we need photos and we need this. And it's like, we can't get back up the hill. We can't get photos. So then as the information became more widespread nationally, then the insurance company said, we got to do something. And they did. They sent mobile crisis trailers. And so people that are designed for catastrophes, go find where those things are located and go talk to those people. They will pull up your claim, your policy. Those folks were really great. So go find out where those most mobile crisis trailers are for your insurance company and get to know your policy limits, get to know those categories.
Now,
Right now.
understand this. Allstate just pulled all fire coverage 2 weeks ago, is my
Yeah.
understanding. And
Yeah, and then the governor just put in a thing that says that they're not allowed to do that, and that's where we get into that legal wrangling. Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one.
yeah, I
Um,
mean, yeah, like we're talking about. I mean, it's like a hurricane in Florida, right? Like Florida is becoming unlivable because no one will insure your house, right? Like I see this as kind of the same thing. Like you got some insurance companies that could go out of business over this fire. You're not talking about like all of Malibu Beach burned up. Each one of them houses is $4 million. You got all the Palisades burned up. All them houses are, 600,000 to 1,300,000. So
yeah, they're looking, as of yesterday, it was a $40 billion estimate, and
okay, that's
when you're talking 40 billion and you haven't even gone on the ground to inspect, insurance companies will go bankrupt.
yeah.
But understand, insurance companies have insurance companies. So it's not a panic mode. It's going back to what are the tools we have to work with. And that's where people really need to understand.
Awesome, brother. Let me ask you this. Let's close this out. We don't need to be super long. Um, Give me like if like right now where we're at, we're about, I don't know, 4 days away or 4 days post fires. They're really fires still burning. Let's say we're in the middle of the fires. What can the general population of America do to help? Like what can they do? What is probably your top three things that they could do to help the situation in California?
The little token gifts that we received up on the hill, from all over the world, really, that the kids could open and see that people care about them and want to move, that really does help. So find a local charity that I'm sure they're already being broadcast out there, and give them a call, send them an email. What do you guys need? Any type of shelter items, little blankets, something for the kids to hold on to, because everybody's going to have a different level of loss. So contact the charity groups and find out what they're really seeing, because I think it's going to be different from different pockets down there.
Okay. Okay.
But it does
Awesome.
help. I mean, it varies in emotional support when you see so much caring coming from all over.
Awesome, brother. Is there anything else you want to add to it? I mean, I think that's perfect. Like we hit the main topics. I think that'd be great.
No, yeah, just really on that insurance, get to understand those policies. The contents list, it can become a nightmare, and it takes you through that trauma all over again. So understand and work with your insurance company. Um, I think the majority of them try to help, but if you have a bad claims adjuster, try to get it switched out.
And the other thing I'm gonna tell everybody, man, this is one of the things USAA does. Like every year they ask you to go around and take pictures of your whole house. And so like we'll go around, it's in an app, you snap a bunch of pictures, open up the safe that we have, snap a bunch of pictures, just document everything that you have so that when something tragic like this happens, then you're not fighting them over what were the contents, right?
No,
Like, oh,
no.
you took this, you didn't take this. No, like this is what we have, this is what we don't have. So
Absolutely. And I will tell you, and because they've earned it, is there's only one insurance company that I did not hear a complaint about, and that was USAA. So
yeah,
shout
which
out to
is
them for taking care of people.
USAA.